fear through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Disciples of Ed. I'm your host, Rob, joined today by Joe Borek. How you doing, Borek?
Doing well, even though the Flyers had to scratch and claw to the almighty in order to get that 5-4 OT win when Voracek looked like he was about to die going in on a breakaway at the end of his shift, but still got it done. But it's always great to talk about some Flyers hockey. Hopefully we can start turning this around and get another win the night we're recording this, which is Wednesday when the Flyers play the Rangers tonight. And people, when they listen to this, will be very happy campers coming off of a win. So
that would be nice because, my goodness, has it been a struggle of late. Yes, they had the comeback win over the Rangers, in which they blew a 2-0 lead, ended up coming back down 3-2 to tie it, 4-3 to tie it, and then, as you mentioned, the Voracek overtime winner to catch the win in that game. And that was much needed because they dropped consecutive games against the Washington Capitals, actually 3 games in the prior week, with a win, and relatively uninspiring win over the Buffalo Sabres, sandwiched in between them. 3 bad efforts, the 3-1 loss on Sunday, which is the first game in front of home fans. Thankful to have the fans back at least right now. That was an uninspiring effort. I can tell you that because I was there in person, and the whole arena was not too happy with the performance there. As I mentioned, the uninspiring 5-4 shootout win over Buffalo, and then the 5-3 loss to the Capitals and 5-4 loss to the Capitals, both games in which they fell down with pretty bad second periods. Tried to fight back at the end, couldn't quite get it done. So a much-needed win over the Rangers, albeit, as you mentioned, uninspiring. And I think it's pretty clear right now, if it wasn't already, that this team, they need some changes defensively, because watching that game against the Rangers, we saw Gostisbehere got turned around completely flat-footed in what ended up being a goal. We had Travis Sanheim have, first off, he almost put the puck in his own net. And then later in the game, he had an instance where he had the puck at the red line, decided to skate back into his own zone, and ended up putting himself face first into the boards. And those are 2 of the many instances in which the Flyers defense has royally screwed up over these past few games. And it's kind of been a recurring theme throughout the season. They have not been good in front of Carter Hart, and they have not been good in front of Brian Elliott. And a big reason why this team has really come back down to earth after a decent start in the standings. There may be help on the way. There have been rumors, yes, just rumors, but it's better than nothing, of the potential of Ekholm from Nashville coming to Philly, or even John Klingberg, which would be really, really nice. Borek, what do you make of those rumors, and what do you make of the fact that both Ghost and Eric Gustafsson have been involved in those rumors on the Flyers' end?
I mean, it makes sense because Ghost also, I mean, he obviously has his flaws on defense, but when we've seen his moving his legs better, there's been much that I've written about him recently kind of having a resurgence in that way. So I could see why teams, especially teams that have helped other defensemen in the past, look to get him. Gus, he might just be exactly what Tyson Barrie is, which is pretty much, for some reason, whenever he played in the East, he sucked in Toronto. He's doing at least half decent again in Edmonton, which is a Western Conference team. So Gus seems like maybe he's just that West Conference guy and just can't do a damn thing worth for anything really much in the East. Obviously, like you said, Ekholm, I think, is a big name to look at. Jomerson's another guy. I saw mention Nicholas Jomerson because he's a veteran on an expiring contract, so he might be a little bit easier for you to get out of Arizona, where Ekholm is probably going to take a first and one of your pretty good young players. So I would say either is fine for me. Klingberg I like. The thing with Klingberg is, though, similarly to Sanheim and Myers, he's not the most consistently efficient defensively. He's a guy that's going to help you on your power play, help you get shots through, help you defensively, but not as consistently as where Jomerson and Ekholm are just going to lock people down defensively and mainly worry about that and then pitch in when they can on the other end. Klingberg looks like Sanheim and Myers to pitch in on offense when he can, and sometimes that hurts him on defense similarly to those two. So he's a little bit different style than the other two, so he would kind of be third on my list just for that reason. And I love John Klingberg. It's just in terms of matching the puzzle of what our team needs, I think he would be third on my list, and the other two would be ahead of him because I think we need guys that are more consistent defensively and are also veterans, because the veteran of your staff is really Braun, but it really isn't. It's really Provorov, who's also 24 years old. So your veteran that actually is always in logging over 25 minutes a night should be someone else on top of a 24-year-old, not just a 24-year-old. So getting Ekholm or Jomerson will really help in that facet. Getting Klingberg will be nice. I just don't know if he's going to very much help smoothen your defensive woes as well as the other two, because he's also not always defensively consistent in terms of efficiency on that end of the puck. He's good when he's at it and playing great, but when he's going a little cold, usually it's because he loses confidence on the defensive end, which then leads to him losing confidence on the offensive end, not the other way around. So,
yeah, you raise a good point about Klingberg, and that's something that's been mentioned along with these rumors, is the fact that maybe he's not the best fit here, given that they're looking for a defensive guy. Obviously, that would mean that Ekholm is up at the top of the list. And I've seen rumors of what may be sent Nashville's way in that trade. We're talking potentially Bobby Brink, maybe Cam York, but probably not. In those rumors, the good news for the Flyers is I didn't see any current names of the team's core mentioned in what will be shipped out. I saw a few prospects. I saw draft picks. I think Nashville's a team that I think they're about to enter a rebuild, so they're looking for some younger talent, looking for some pieces that they can build around.
Oh, not
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Patrick. I saw Patrick and a first was one of the ones I read for Ekholm, which is something in the preview video I did today. I asked people to comment on to see what people thought of that, because when I was reading something the other day, that's a trade that someone proposed that they could very well ask for, because Nashville definitely needs centers, and getting a first-round pick. Maybe Pooley will be able to, in the later round, we hope, in the later part of the first round, that would mean we're doing good, pick up somebody there with an extra pick, since they did get rid of some picks. So that could be a trade they could look for. That was something I did read. That would be kind of involving a core piece where Patrick's still working his way back from injury, but obviously foreseeing the future, I think you would consider him a part of the core. So that would be the only one I've seen involving a technical core piece.
Yeah, and really, I don't think the fan base will be too up in arms over that, because I think the fan base over the years, yes, he's coming back from missing the entire season last year, but I feel like a lot of people have kind of maybe soured on him a little bit, maybe begun to realize that he's probably not going to live up to the hype of a second overall pick. It might be kind of a James Van Riemsdyk situation all over again, albeit Van Riemsdyk is playing like a second overall pick this year. It only took him, 14 years to get there. But yeah, I think a lot of the fan base
playing in Toronto. He was either had to be in Toronto or take 14 years in Philadelphia.
Either one of those, yeah. But I think that a lot of the fan base is beginning to realize that maybe Nolan Patrick potentially isn't all that. And with that being said, they're probably okay with trading him as part of a package for one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL, in shoring up a need that the Flyers badly need addressed if they want to contend this season or any time in the near future. So yeah, if you want to throw Nolan Patrick in there, by all means, go ahead and do it. I mean, yeah, I think we know what he's going to be.
The reason I would do it too is Ekholm on top of others. Jomerson, you could obviously re-sign. I believe he's 34. who's coming off of an expiring contract that would probably then go down into the more $3 million range rather than what he's at now at 5 something, if I'm not mistaken. Ekholm has next year on his tag at only 3 something. He has one of the best contracts while being one of the more consistent defensemen. That's why it takes a little bit more, but I would be willing, like you were kind of saying, as much as I like Patrick, and he's only 22 freaking years old and went through injuries. Maybe he's one of those guys at 25. He does hit it and becomes a JVR, like you said. He goes elsewhere and really performs, and maybe he'll be the next JVR that comes back at his age 30 season, or 29, whatever the hell it was.
At a much heavier price tag.
Yeah, but it will be interesting to see what they do with Patrick. But Ekholm's at the top of my list. My second guy, just because he plays similar to a lesser version of Ekholm and was made by a team that obviously had winning pedigree with the Bowmans, is Jomerson, because he was a big part of their teams back in the day in Chi-Town, as much as I hate to admit it, he was. So he's somebody I would like. I heard Goligoski mentioned. He's kind of an outlier because I just don't know how much you would get from Alex Goligoski at this point of his career, but he fits in that same mold. It's just I don't know where he's at this point of his career.
I think with Goligoski, you're looking at the last option there, and I think you're looking at literally just getting what Matt Niskanen was able to bring to the table last season, which is just stability, veteran stability, and a defensive presence. A guy who's defensively responsible and maybe, not continually getting out of position like some of these other guys are. That's what Niskanen brought to the table, just the defensive responsibility and the veteran presence that really helped stabilize the defensive core, all the young guys last season. So if you get Goligoski, I think that's what you're looking at for a ceiling with him.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Ekholm, though, he stabilizes the defense, and we have better guys that are on both ends of the puck. Like, Myers was a guy that liked to run and gun a bit, so did Sanheim. Scott Gordon and other people with the Phantoms helped them work on becoming more both ways. And then when they're at their best, you see them be able to do both sides of it in the NHL, which will probably be what happens in their future when they hit their prime at 26, 27, what have you. Provorov's not even in his full prime years and is already a freaking tank. So you have the better guys than Toronto, in my opinion, to bring in a guy that just mends everything together. For Toronto, that was Jake Muzzin. For us, I think the best guy to do that would be Ekholm. But I don't know if the Flyers are going to be willing to bite the bullet enough to get Ekholm, which then I think their fallback should be and needs to be Jomerson, just because he's almost as consistent as Ekholm, where other guys like David Savard that I've liked in the past of his career, but recently has gone down a bit, that I saw check out all his articles Jamie Baskow wrote about. I like him. I just don't like him as much as these other two. So it's more, I know we need more righty defensemen, but I don't want to trade for somebody just to get a righty defenseman when they're not as good, in my opinion, as a Jomerson or Ekholm.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Another thing that I want to address here is Shane Gostisbehere's presence in the trade rumors. You have people like me in the fan base who just can't stand the guy anymore. You have people like yourself and Steve in the fan base who, you want to keep the guy around. You want to see if he can get back to what he was a few years ago. What's your take on the potential of trading Ghost?
For the right price and the right player, I'm now fine with it. It depends what it is, though. Like, you better not get me the next what Gudas played here other than his final year. Like, if he does what he's playing in his final year now in Florida, then I would be all right with that. But if you give me what he played here, you better not trade Ghost for that, because I'm just going to be like, what the hell was the fucking point of that? So if it's for the right guy, I'm okay with it. I would much rather see Gus go, though, because I said it earlier in the podcast. He just seems to me, from watching, he only performs better in the West, which has more quickness, gunning, and not as much of the East, where you still see more fighting, physicality. The Tom Wilsons, the Ross Johnsons of the world, the who could have still been in the East if we didn't get rid of him. Curtis Gabriel is in the West, kicking everyone's ass. But you have that happen more in the East, so I think he would be better off in the West. But I'm fine with it for the right price. That's the way I would put that. But I think moving on from Ghost, raises the question that I wanted to ask you, Rob, which is we're talking about just getting one defenseman. We could honestly easily say we need two, because you got Provorov, Sanheim, and Myers. Beyond them, if you're saying we should move on from Ghost, there's nobody else that's a sure shot. Hag's been all right this year. He's had an even plus minus. Has looked solid, checking, blocking shots. All right defensively when he's paired with the right people and not in a stupid line. But you could definitely argue we need two guys, and Ghost might be a guy that can get you someone that's either on an expiring contract the team wants to move on from, or a defenseman that's kind of in the middle right now that's also trying to figure him out himself, and you can bring in two guys. So that's also an interesting question. I wondered what your opinion was on.
Well, first off, the first rumor that I saw actually involved both Ghost and Gustafson going to Nashville in exchange for Ekholm. And in that situation, absolutely, yes, you pulled the trigger on that. When it comes to Ghost, though, I think that I've said it time and time again, he's a defensive liability. Yes, he does have some offensive value, but with the state of the team right now, they have plenty of forward depth. They don't have a problem putting the puck in the net. Their issue is with the defense and with the guys on defense not able to help out in their own zone. So if you can trade him and get rid of him in exchange for a guy who, as we mentioned, stabilizes the defense and has a bit more of a defensive focus and can help clear out the net front in front of Carter Hart and Brian Elliott, you got to do it. Because that's what the team needs right now. They don't need another offensive defenseman. They have those. Provorov's an offensive defenseman. Myers can be. Sanheim can be. You need a defensive, responsible, stay-at-home defenseman. If you can get that in exchange for Ghost, you can make this team a contender pretty much right off the bat if you get a good enough one in exchange for Stu Gostisbehere.
Yeah, now Ghost, I would. Now, if we get like an Ekholm or a Jomerson for, say, other people, and then Ghost, I would debate moving for that righty defenseman that's just a defensive defenseman, like I mentioned before, a Savard or a Jason Demers or someone of that ilk of the world, just because you're trying to win now and they're a veteran that stabilizes your defense and is right-handed when you have a crap ton of lefties. Now, that's more of what Braun was 2 years ago, because Braun is now slowing up. So I would be fine with going that route, kind of getting the righty stabilizer that's nothing sexy but just kind of gets it done player for Ghost, and then getting the better of the two, like a Jomerson or Ekholm with other assets. That would be my kind of dream scenario. Not necessarily those two right-handers, but somebody that's a good right-hander stabilizing defender, plus getting an Ekholm or Jomerson would kind of be my dream scenario for a defense, because I think you need two. That would get you over the hump the most, because we haven't protected our goalies well at all, like you hinted at the beginning. So,
right. Yeah, the defense certainly is an issue that needs to be shored up. We'll see what Chuck Fletcher can do about that. Hopefully he's just as aggressive as he has been in making some of the other deals, that he goes out and he gets that guy that the Flyers need to really maybe be one of the final pieces to the puzzle, if not the final piece to the puzzle. I think that could turn them from, a decent team that's struggling right now into potentially a very good team. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully Chuck Fletcher can come through for us and make that happen. In the meantime, though, we've got some games to worry about, and we already ran through some of the previous games leading up to this. Not too impressive, the 3 losses to Washington, which really hurt them in the division playoff race, and then the ugly win against Buffalo, the ugly win against the New York Rangers. Why don't you just talk about some of the things that you saw in those games, some of the reasons why they fell apart against the Capitals, and some of the reasons why they struggled to beat 2 bad teams in Buffalo and the Rangers. We all know about the defense, but why don't you talk about some of the things that you saw of the team in those games?
Yeah, I mean, the Rangers are an interesting team, because if you look on the roster sheet, they really shouldn't suck. But they do, and it's because Zibanejad decided to be 7 times less of what he was last year. So if that changes, we'll see what happens with them. But the Sabres are definitely a team that because of their defense, and a guy that's also been in trade rumors, some of to the Flyers, Rasmus Ristolainen, never emerging fully to his full potential, so maybe he'll do it elsewhere. It would be nice if he does it here, so maybe he could be that right-hander that gets it done. But
or by the way, sorry to butt in, maybe excels under a new coach up there in Buffalo. They fired Ralph Kruger today, so that'll be something to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, you have to see if he excels under a new head coach. I mean, the Pagulas care a hell of a lot more about the Bills than they do about the Sabres. That's very apparent. But you got to a shootout and were able to win. The Flyers' biggest issue is they scored, and then they get scored on in about at most a 5-minute stretch in all these games. And that's been their biggest issue, which they finally got over against the Rangers technically, but not really, because they scored to tie it up at the end of the second. Then Kevin Rooney scored at the beginning of the damn third period. So it was still kind of pretty similar, but the difference was they went up 2-0 and then blew a lead, which is kind of worse, and then made it 3-2 when Gauthier scored, and then they came back. Like, that was a very much like they had to get through it and just battle and get gritty and get through that win. Shout out to Gritty, but it was great to see them be able to persevere. But you should be able to, when you go up 2-0 against a Rangers team, find a way to keep supplanting the goals and not allow them to full blown attack you and end up going up 3-2 and having to work your way back. Evening it up, going down again at the start of the third, and then having a big goal that we finally saw the technical third line other than G. You saw Jake get the great assist and then come up big in OT. I want to see more throughout our lineup because, yes, at the beginning we were getting a lot of scoring throughout. Now it's mainly been Cooch, Couturier, Farabee, and JVR involved in pretty much any goal. And if other people are, it's been like G and Voracek. I would like to see other guys start to really get going again, because that's been a big issue of late. We're sitting Lindblom tonight, and we're also sitting, according to, I saw Jamie tweet, Albe-Kubel, and then Ghost is going to sit, so it seems like it will be Hag and Gus again with Sanheim, Myers, and then Provy will stay with Braun, and then Bunnerman and Andreoff will be on that fourth line. So they're mixing it up to play the Rangers. If this game actually happens tonight, by the way, because I don't know if you saw that update. All the Rangers coaches are in COVID protocol.
I did not. That's something that eluded me, but interesting development there. And yeah, I kind of assumed that at some point Lindblom was going to be benched. I mean, obviously we've talked about the cancer thing numerous times, and yes, that's a really tough thing to come back from. And you begin to wonder, is he, fully back in game shape yet? Because he's not the presence that he was before he went out last year. He doesn't have the chemistry with his line mates that he had before he went out last year. He doesn't seem like the same player. Okay. And you figure that maybe because of the fact that he spent his offseason trying to recuperate from cancer as opposed to getting ready for the upcoming season, that might have hurt him a little bit. Hopefully, with a few games off and a little bit of rest, he can come back and we can begin to see more of the Oscar Lindblom that we saw last season. So maybe that's the thing there.
I also think that's what Knack needs, just a headspace time, because he's been making some plays you would never see him make coming up through the minors now in the NHL as well, where he's chipped in at the PK at times last year. Normally you don't see him making just the easy mistakes of not knowing when to go on the ice for a shift, first of all, leading to the one Washington goal, and then just making boneheaded plays along the boards leading to penalties. That's normally, he's the guy that helps draw penalties, like we've been seeing so much from Farabee this year. So I think resting him is a good thing as well, along with the lines of what you said with Oscar, because he kind of needs a headspace time to just settle back and kind of become the Albe-Kubel we grow to love as a very aggressive forechecker that pisses off the other team while also being able to chip in at times and not the guy that's actually taking penalties rather than being able to make the other team get them on him. So,
right, and speaking of headspace, it was good to see Nolan Patrick pot a goal the other day, albeit in a losing effort. He ended a 16-game pointless streak, not goalless streak, a pointless streak in which After he started the season with 5 points in 7 games, 16 games in a row without getting on the score sheet. So really nice to see him get on the board there and do it with a goal nonetheless. Hopefully that can help him get going a little bit. Another guy, Travis Konechny, he had the hat trick, I believe it was in the second game of the season against the Penguins. Really has not done a whole lot. He did have a goal out in Pittsburgh last time they were out there for the 3-game set. He had a goal there, but really has not done a whole lot since that second game of the season. So, and that's a guy who was your leading scorer last year. So that's a big loss with him not performing the way that he's capable of. If he can get his game together and start playing the way he did last season, then that changes everything completely. We talked about how much depth the Flyers offense has, but as you mentioned, it's really been just a handful of guys who have been carrying the load there lately. So if they can start spreading it out a little bit, I think that makes them a much more lethal team.
Yeah, you got to start spreading the love and also not having the old traits kick back in, which I saw a little bit against the Capitals and also against a Rangers team that you should be more aggressive against as well as Buffalo. You're sometimes having guys when they should shoot getting pass happy again, where we were going away from that during our good stretch, which was nice to see. Now in some facets we're going back to it, and that's not what you want to see. So I would like to see us go away from that again and really focus on when you have the shot, just shoot the damn puck, because a lot of guys on this team have a pretty damn good shot, obviously as displayed by the scoring numbers when people were really churning early on this season, and now we're getting colder throughout the lineup. So I would like to see guys shoot it a little bit more. Knack has one of the more underrated shots. He's not shooting it enough this year. He keeps trying to pass through defenders, and that's why I think benching him will help him settle down and kind of go back to what he was last year as well. The same will happen for Lindblom, who's trying to be passing through guys when he has one of the best shots on the whole damn team. So use it. That's why I think being able to bench those guys might be beneficial, and you might see it for guys again in the future, like maybe even TK again. You might see it with Raffle, which we've seen already, because Raff's playing all right, but not like you would normally expect to the fullest extent. So I don't think this is going to end unless if we trade for people that really fill those gaps, and then you're not going to see all those guys in as much, so therefore they'll just be healthy scratches rather than being considered benched all the time.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very good point there as well. And speaking of all that stuff, we're not quite there yet, but by the time we record our show next week, we will be past what will be the technical halfway point of this 56-game season, We're at 26 games, I believe, right now, so we'll be past 28 by the time we record the next episode. So with that being said, let's take a look into the groups of the forwards, the defensemen, and the goalies, and kind of just give them a collective rating through what we've seen through the first 26 games of the season. And we'll start with the forwards. Borek, what would you give the Flyers forwards as a collective, a letter grade through the first 26 games of the season?
I would say a letter grade would probably be a B, just because offensively we have a very good first line, 29 points from JVR, 19 from Coots, and 24 from Farabee. Hayes has looked very good offensively, but his defensive numbers have not been nearly as good as last year. His 20 points and 26. Lawton's going a little bit cold during our struggle bunny stretch here, so I would like to see him go back to what he was when we were hot and firing, 15 points and 23. So offensively, we have some production, 21 points from both G and Jake. But I think the big thing when you look at quotes and stuff from around the coaching staff that we get from Nitty Gritty, that you tend to get the echo of, I want to see more from the defense forward-wise as well as the actual defense, because obviously it's like how your defense can lead to your offense. Well, it kind of works both ways. Your forward core playing great defense can lead to your defensemen playing significantly better defense, because they're not running around like chickens with no head, because the forwards don't pick anybody up at center ice. So right. That would go a long way in helping the defense that is not the most sexy put together defense, with having a Braun who's aging out, who knows how to get to the right spots, but just ain't quick enough at 34 anymore, as well as a Gus who's all offensive and a Ghost who's all offensive on the same defense. If your forward core who has Raffle, who's supposed to be very good defensively, his numbers went down this year. Voracek, who was very good last year defensively, is looking solid, but not as good as last year. I would like to see him do more on the other end this year. Hayes has really took a step down defensively, looking great offensively. I think that's a big thing that this team really needs to do. You need this forward core to get much better defensively. That's why I give them a B. The only reason it's as high as a B is because of how damn good 8 people have been offensively at JVR, Cooch, Fairby, Launch, Hayes, Konechny, Voracek, and Giroux. If all those guys were not doing as good as they are offensively, it probably would have been a C+ or a B-. But because of the offense, I will give it a B.
Right. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there, and I'm actually going to go with a B- just because I, too, want to see more out of them in a defensive aspect. We know that they can put the puck in the net. That's been proven so far. Lately, they've been going out and scoring 3-4 goals a game, which in most cases should be enough to win. Now, they've been giving up more than that. They've been giving up 4 or 5 goals a game, and that is due, in some part at least, to the fact that, as you alluded to, they're struggling defensively. They're not what they were last season. As you mentioned, Raffle, Kevin Hayes has been a pretty big disappointment on the defensive side of things, although he's putting up the numbers offensively. So really, I've got the same reasoning as you. I would grade a little bit lower based on their lack of defensive prowess and how much it's hurt the team. They're not doing anything to relieve pressure in front of the goaltenders. They're not doing anything to take pressure off of the defensemen, and they're allowing their opponents to get extended time in the zone and doing things like struggling with clearing the puck and turning the puck over in bad areas and just really costly stuff like that, and things that can easily be avoided. And if they're able to fix that, then they're going to be a much more effective hockey team. But just so far, their lack of success in the defensive end really sticks out to me. And so that's why I'm going B-, because the goal scoring has been great. The depth, some guys have struggled, but by and large, the depth has come through for them on the offensive end. It's the defensive end where the struggles have been. So, yeah, I'm going B- for the Flyers forward group. Moving on to the defense, we know that they haven't been great, but why don't you give them a letter grade as well?
That's a bad question. Let's see here. I'll go, since we did have a streak where their flaws were not as exposed, I'll give them a C, and that's just because Provorov's still Provorov. When they're looking really good, Sanheim and Myers does look like it could be a future line. It's just both guys are only 24, so they're going to make the young mistakes. That's why bringing in the veterans we alluded to later, can help solidify your defense and is key. But because I have very much faith in those 3 guys, and when they're at their best, our defense has looked average this year, rather than below average. That's why I would say it will be a C, due to the promise of having those 3 guys, and the fact that Hag, through having a shitty line partner for his skill set the entire season pretty much, is still at an even plus minus and has actually performed a little bit better than I thought he would while not being paired with people that go with him at all. So I will say a C.
Yeah, I'm going to go C as well. I actually made a Twitter post about it the other day, that their young defensemen that were so highly touted, they've all taken a step back. Provorov, yes, he's been good more often than not, but he's taken a step back this year, I feel. Phil Myers has taken a step back. Travis Sanheim has taken a step back. And just, maybe it's some athletes have that sophomore slump, and now Provorov's not a sophomore. He's been around for a few years. But the other guys, yeah, maybe they're taking a step back in that sophomore slump. So it could be that. I want to see more. I want to see growth out of them instead of regression. And what we've seen so far is regression. So they need to right the ship there. And as we alluded to earlier on in the podcast, maybe finding that right piece to fit in there, that defensive defenseman could help out a lot. And that would bring the grade up if they're able to do that. But and you've got to account, obviously, for the terrible defense we've seen from Gustafsson so far. That brings the grade down. Ghost being bad on the defensive end, that brings the grade down as well. So I'm going to go C. I really could lean C-, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I'll go C as well. And
I think it's also partially on Fletch, because Chuck Fletcher could have got us a defenseman. And I know Steele said this all the time in podcasts I do with him, he got jumpy. When Niskanen retired, he went, we already have Justin Braun. Let's sign Justin Braun back. He didn't have to do that. He picked a guy that fits a skill set in Eric Gustafsson that we didn't really need. Like you talked about in this podcast, we have enough offense from our defense core. We needed more of a defensive solidifier. So I think these guys regressing is because you had a guy in Niskanen that's a great savvy veteran that helped solidify the defense last year for a bunch of then 23-year-old. Now you have all the 24-year-olds are pretty much the veterans, because Braun is not a defensive solidifier at this point of his career. He's just a great guy in the locker room that knows how to be smart on the ice, but just can't hit all of his spots because of the speed at this point of his career.
Ideally, he would be a seventh defenseman, but he's out there because of necessity.
Exactly. Yeah, ideally, he's a great guy to have in your room to be a seventh defenseman. Exactly. Not a guy that you're playing over 18 minutes a night.
Yes. Anyway, that brings us to the final grouping, which is the two goaltenders, Carter Hart, Brian Elliott. And it's been a struggle for Carter Hart this year, but Brian Elliott has kind of exceeded expectations a little bit. Why don't you give them a grade?
Well, Moose has definitely exceeded expectations. I mean, he's at a 9.04 with 7-3, 2.64. Hart.
And that 9.04, by the way, was much higher going into the last few games where he struggled a bit against the Penguins and the Washington Capitals, by the way. So he was actually doing much better than that leading up until the past week or so.
Yeah, and some of those games were also our defense looked like pure ass. So he did not get helped at all, which is a big reason why Carter Hart's numbers would not be as good even if our defense was playing great, just because he, as he said himself, has not played as well as he hopes. But they would not be a 3.62 and an 8.84 if anyone knew what the fuck they were doing half of the time. Yeah. And actually protected the front of the net and hit people away from the front of the net, rather than being like, hi, how you doing? How are the wife and kids doing? Oh, good. Okay, that's great to hear. And then they score. So it would be nice if you have people like now back on defense in the AHL. Morin has been doing, to throw a shout out to the AHL guys in here. Maybe he can be a guy that does that for you, since he's back on defense and should have never been playing forward in the first place, except for the fact of that has seemed to help him in getting into his own zone. So maybe that was a blessing in disguise in that facet. But he looks very good on defense, being able to hit guys out of the front of the net. If he can stay healthy, maybe he becomes that lefty that does that for you. Then all you have to add is a John Merson or Ekholm, and you don't have to worry about adding a second guy. But you want to see that soon, because nobody else. Hag's been solid this year, like I said, at times, but really has not had a guy on his team that pairs with him well all season to his skill sets. Gus should not be paired with a Hag. A Braun can't be paired with a Hag. So that's just the way it is. And AV wants to get Myers and Sanheim going well together is obviously apparent. So I think his team just needs to hit people out of the front of the net. That's why their goaltending has these fucking numbers. If their defense was better, it wouldn't be like that. That's why I'm still giving their goaltending at this point a B-, because of I blame the defense. I can't blame Carter Hart for all the struggle. I would say at worst, if we had a good defense, his goals against is like a 3.0 with a probably .899 or low .9 something at worst. So that's why I would still say B-, because it's all on the defensive forward play that we hinted at earlier, and the defense. They're leaving the goaltenders out to dry 99% of the time.
Yeah, that's fair. And the defense obviously is a good point. I'm going to go with a C+, just because, as I said, Brian Elliott's played well. He's had a little bit of a struggle the past few times out, as you alluded to. The defense has a lot to do with that. Carter Hart, though, yes, the defense has been equally bad in front of him, but I think the book is out now that he can be beat to the glove side. Teams have been doing that a lot this season, and he's really struggled with that. And he's gotten beat to the glove side on shots that he's not even screened on, which is, it's kind of an alarming thing if I'm being completely honest. And these were shots that he stopped last year. And also another thing, the rebound control that he was so good with last season has not quite been as good this year. So, yes, the defense has been bad in front of him, but fundamentally he has not been as good as we know that he can be. And whether it's a mental thing or whether, he's just going through kind of a sophomore slump, he needs to snap out of it. He needs to get back to being the fundamentally sound, solid goaltender that can steal games like he was last season. Like last year, if you put him out there with this defense, there would be times where he would go out there and he would make, 30 saves on 31 shots and just be absolutely spectacular and stand on his head and get the team a win. And we haven't seen that from him this season. So hopefully he can kind of right the ship there, get back to what he was doing last year, work on that glove hand a little bit because he struggled with it. Until he does that, I'm giving this goaltending a C+ grade. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to throw in?
I mean, I think Hart is, when you're a young goaltender, he's been playing over his head. We all forget he's only 22 years old. I mean, I'm
playing in the most unforgiving sports market in North America.
Yeah, I'm one of the younger people whenever I go to cover games or anything trying to break into the business, and I'm 24. This dude's 2 years younger than I am. So, I mean, he has time. He hasn't even hit his prime yet and has already done great things in the league. I think it looks like from the Flyers from afar too, and I'm sure some players could have this feeling in the locker room. It's not like you set them up with their defense for the biggest success looking at it now through the 2020 blinders, seeing what happened now over time. Because like I said, you got Gus, he didn't fit into replacing a Niskanen at all. Getting Braun at this point of his career didn't fit into replacing a Niskanen at all. So now you're playing catch up and having to get defensemen now. So that's why I went with a little bit of a higher grade, because I feel like especially for a young goalie, you're trying to mature into one of the best in the league, along with Moose, who was great for the room, but stepped up in big moments and kind of made the saves he always had to make last year, similar to what Reimer's doing for the Hurricanes this year. And then this year has stepped up to an even bigger degree. I would think you would want to get a more solidified defense around them, where that's the one biggest thing. Fletcher did well with the offense in terms of offensive output forward group, not so sexy in terms of the defense. So that's something I want to see him adjust and really work hard to get fixed now, sooner rather than later, especially if you're trading for somebody coming from Canada because of the weight.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And yes, the coming from Canada thing is a good point. The fact that there will need to be a 14-day quarantine, that certainly needs to be accounted for as well. So that's a good point. My final thought is, if you're looking for something to eat while you're watching the Flyers or while you're doing anything, the place to go is Just Food. You can reach them by phone at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. Located in Buckingham Green in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. Excellent selection of food. Anything you want, they've got it, and they've got the best. Their owner, Asian Rob, a great friend of the Always Next to Your podcast network. So definitely check them out. Once again, that's Just Food at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. Once again, Just Food, located in Buckingham Green in Buckingham, Pennsylvania. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Disciples of Ed, and we'll be back with another one next week.
Man, I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.